you ever going to get a say in the Liberals' plan for a net zero economy? A new contract posting by the federal government indicates probably not. Today on this episode of The Buffalo, a net zero Canada by the Liberals metric is going to cost you trillions. And you might not even get to tell the Liberals what you think about any of it. Because, as with everything, they're going to do it to you rather than with you. Net zero is a phrase we see tossed around, well, everywhere these days. Remember this from the UCP debate?
I remember getting hit by Graham Thompson years ago in 2012 when I talked about how the science wasn't settled on climate change. And I can tell you what I've come around full circle on that. I am now probably the first and early adopter of thinking that we can hit a net zero target and we can get there faster than anywhere else.
Net zero emissions mean that for every bit of CO2 emitted in a project or to produce a product, it has to be offset, stored, or absorbed elsewhere. Think about adding the cost of tree planting to your t-shirt that had to be shipped to you from Bangladesh, or the cost to offset your tank of diesel fuel, which is already nearly $2 a liter. Net zero adds an additional cost and consideration for literally everything, and it's very odd to see in a country like Canada, one of the most forested places on the face of the earth. Now, beyond the cost of net zero, which I'll get to in a minute, one of the first stages of this great green reset is banning fossil-fueled cars, which will require a massive build-out of the energy grid and charging infrastructure to force people to use technology that doesn't work all that well in our cold winter or inside of our sparse country. And that is according to electric car advocates. So the Liberals are already doing this net zero thing, and they didn't think to ask you what you would want to do. And based on this procurement request from the federal government, they have absolutely no real plan to engage you in the green reset. Let me show you. Environment and Climate Change Canada will need facilitation services as and when requested to conduct facilitated engagement services to support the delivery of the Net Zero Advisory Body mandate. Engagement activities. Activities include, but are not limited to, workshops, conferences, roundtables, and special events. May include participation from the Canadian public, provinces, territories, municipalities, Aboriginal governments or organizations, youth, civil society, industry, or other stakeholders, experts, including scientists and Indigenous knowledge holders and international bodies. Let me guess, like the World Economic Forum, but may include is the phrase there. So the Trudeau government won't guarantee they will actually consult with the provinces or Canadians, the rate-paying public. This episode of The Buffalo is brought to you in a partnership with our friends at the Alberta Prosperity Project. They're a nonpartisan movement committed to uniting all Albertans, businesses, and organizations to protect their interests, freedoms, rights, prosperity, and self-determination. Check them out at albertaprosperityproject.com. Now, what's the cost of net zero? Well, take a look at this in the Financial Post from just last year. RBC released a report called the 2 Trillion Transition, Planning for Canada's Place in a Net Zero World, which plots out a possible course for the country to reduce its emissions in line with a net zero emissions target by 2050 and budgets the cost of the shift. That's roughly equivalent to Canada's annual GDP last year, or 2020, which stood at just under $2 trillion last year, according to Statistics Canada. All told, the Toronto-based bank believes the government and private sector needs to spend $56.4 billion annually in 6 different sectors to meet its net zero targets. Broken down, the report pegs the price at $25 billion per year for building out electric vehicle infrastructure in the transportation sector, $13.7 billion on emissions reductions in the oil and gas sector, $5.4 billion retrofitting old buildings, $5.4 billion in the electricity sector, $4.4 billion in the heavy industries, and $2.5 billion in the agricultural sector. The expected cost of emissions reductions in the oil sands alone is projected to be $5.5 billion annually. Now, who pays for all of this? We will. And who will get a say? We don't. There's something very wrong with a political system that can allow a politician to change every aspect of our lives without putting it to a vote in the House of Commons or even doing the most basic consultation with you first. This has been The Buffalo. For Rebel News, I'm Sheila Gunn Reid. For more pro-Western content just like this, reflecting the values and the people of the West, be sure to check out thebuffalo.ca.